The first thing we want to do is to make sure that as we're working with our schools and districts that we help them see the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish, how that we need to build a foundation, design units of study, and implement the curriculum. So with Catalyst 1, there are several things that we want to look at today. First of all, we need to understand what a rigorous curriculum design is. And as I look at the definition, I'm thinking about it's a roadmap, it's a high-quality delivery system. It has to have aligned components that are placed in units. We've gone through a period of time with No Child Left Behind where we were trying to teach a standards-based curriculum. And as a result, we often got sidetracked with trying to teach each individual standard to mastery, that we sometimes forgot that it was interconnected and that we actually needed units that were seamlessly pulled together, emphasizing several different standards at one time and being able to master those collectively rather than one single segment. So we are looking at, with Common Core, how to make sure we have clear learning outcomes with matching assessments, but that we're doing it in a more unit-based approach, a single rich task as mentioned in the Common Core literature. And we want to make sure that we don't segment it and compartmentalize the standards so much that they lose their full robustness. When we look at a Catalyst 1, I just want to tell you from the STI standpoint of what we're offering and how we would love to be able to help our clients and our customers. Our first objective is to help our teachers completely deconstruct the standards and understand what Common Core is requiring at the rigorous level that it is intended. We also want to certainly help them plan for the creation of assessments and a formative system that will give them the best information as they're teaching these units. We want to make sure that as we're helping them, we find items that are very closely aligned to the PART or the SMARTER types of items, depending on what state we're working in. And then we want to make sure that for the third objective, we look at the literacy component, helping ELA, science, history, and other technical courses all come together to determine how they can seamlessly work through the Common Core ELA standards and help each other so that by the time our students are reaching high school, they have about 80% of their academic day spent in informational text and that they are understanding and mastering those elements of literacy. We also want to make sure that in the mathematics department we are creating mathematical minds. We also hope to help teachers, especially at the elementary level, to be able to build upon the capacity of their students to truly become mathematical minds, not just answer math questions based on rules, have a deep understanding of math that's required in order to think at the level that Common Core is requiring and that our colleges require in today's society. We want to help our teachers implement the 8 mathematical practices as we're pacing with them, help them determine which units these practices would best be accentuated. We know we can't use every practice on every lesson, so where do they best fit and how can we help the teachers develop those units? Finally, we want to make sure that before we leave our schools that we have a plan for implementing Common Core with them and that the current lessons for the months to come will fully explore Common Core. Now, in Catalyst 1, this is, again, an introductory compartment to our full services with STI Achievement Services for this year, and it is directly correlated to Common Core and the deconstruction of Common Core, the building of the curriculum, and developing assessments alongside with teachers to help them best formatively assess their students. Typically on a day one of an engagement, we would go in and work on a project scoping with administrators and other teacher leaders and teachers themselves, determine what the gap analysis may be in the school at that time for Common Core, what is the current state of infusing Common Core in that particular school or district, what programs are they using to support Common Core, what learning opportunities do they have for their teachers and to what degree those will be offered during the year, what's the long-term timeline, and what are the current gaps on the gap analysis. Then we would begin working individually with teachers. We would like to have at least 2 days with each subject matter. For example, for ELA, we would need a 2-day workshop helping them to deconstruct their standards and to pace. Also, looking at a vertical alignment would be helpful. Sometimes we can't accomplish all of that within a school district if they don't have all the various grades there, but it's really great to have a K-5 or K-6 group of teachers working together on this 2-day ELA, and then the high school teachers working together as well. We want to make sure that before we leave, we have a plan, a pacing plan, and a beginnings to a curriculum map started for these teachers. So this would be a 2-day workshop for ELA. Then we would also want to have a 2-day workshop for math teachers who are going to also completely deconstruct those standards. Sometimes it gets difficult for elementary teachers to do both, and although they're required to teach both. So in a lot of districts, they will simply decide who will go to the math training and who will go to the ELA training. We know that the domains of math would need to be deconstructed by grade level. The elements of the math need to be traced back to their origin so that teachers can truly understand at their specific grade level when this concept was introduced to the students, how much have they had in their background, where do those teachers need to take them to be ready for the next level. And we would also have a plan for developing formative assessments. We would also like to work 2 days with the science and technical groups to make sure that in their current science curriculum, they are implementing the 10 literacy standards for informational text and the 10 writing standards found in the ELA Common Core standards. Those 20 standards are part of the science accountability under the Common Core model, and those standards need to be implemented alongside their science content standards. Many science and history teachers feel a little bit maybe insecure in working with literacy, and they feel like, well, I don't know how to teach reading. That's not what I was trained to do. But as we work with them to show them how that these standards naturally mesh with a lot of their content standards, we've seen their fears abated, and they are truly moving forward and doing great work in some of the states that we've been working in, helping them for science and technical courses. Also working with the history to work on those same reading 10 standards and writing 10 standards for informational text, and making sure that they have a clear understanding of how they can already implement this with their current standards. We're not asking them to build a separate section for literacy. We're asking them to infuse literacy in their current content. And many of the science and history teachers find that they are already doing this. It just hasn't been an intentional focus on literacy in the past, but now that they're making it that, it's very easy. And a lot of the teachers that we've worked with have said it was a seamless transition for them. So we really want to help the science and history teachers in the various schools that we work in understand that it's not supposed to make their life more difficult. It's just bringing a focus to what they've been doing in the past and making sure that literacy is the focus. And then finally, we would like to have a one-day overview of what we've done during that particular week with our administration to make sure that everything that we've set out to accomplish has been accomplished. What are the next steps? What do we need to do moving forward with these particular groups? Now, this is a basic package, and there are many variations of how it can take form and shape. It's certainly not limited to this particular model, although this is the basic model. One of the very first things that we would do as we walk in to work with your teachers is to show them the big picture of how standards, assessments, instruction, and data all match and mesh together to make a comprehensive, rigorous curriculum. And so we spend a few minutes talking about what that big picture is and how it needs to look. In addition to that, we would talk with them for a little bit about their current vision with Common Core, what their timelines are, particularly their leadership roles, what the gap analysis is currently showing, What types of communications do they have between administrators, leaders, administrators, and other stakeholders such as students and parents? We would also talk about the different types of instructional strategies and materials that would be needed. And we would also see where the professional development is currently leading them in your district. We would talk about assessment and the types of data that will be used as you have assessments, whether it's a teacher-made assessment or a common assessment. One of the things that I have observed in many of the schools that I've been in is that teachers don't often understand how to use the data if no one gives it to them in a format that's easy for them. I was recently at a school district, and they told me that all they got was a spreadsheet of an enormous amount of state data, and they were told to disseminate it and use it, and it really was no benefit to them because they really had no clear direction on what to actually do with it. So part of our time is spent showing them how they can use individual teacher data as well as standardized data from high-stakes assessments that may come to them, as well as common assessment data, and how that they can actually use it to drive instruction, not to just inform them on how poorly or how great their kids did on that particular assessment. We also talk about the scope and sequence and pacing, if they have a current pacing guide. If they do, how does it need to be changed because of Common Core? If they don't have a pacing guide or curriculum map, then we start implementing that and helping them build it. We also talk about technology. There are several technology standards embedded in the Common Core literacy for ELA, and so we want to make sure that those standards have the support that they need to be accurately implemented in those classes. We also talk with our teachers about the vision that they have for college and career readiness, the vision of where they are now in terms of student performance, in terms of curriculum and instruction, assessment, professional development, and how that they're transitioning their students to college and career readiness standards. We also talk about, where we are now, where do we want to be by 2014-15, and then what do we have to do to get prepared. And depending on what grade level you are, that will determine how much of a gap that you really have to make in order to make sure that your students are college and career ready. We have a planning template for teachers that we ask them to work through. First of all, they have pre-assessments, post-assessments, formatives, curriculum development, the instructional plans, a correlation study of their current standards with new Common Core if that's relevant, and actually reviewing data that they may have. Vertical planning, interdisciplinary planning, and communication. All of these pieces are important for the teachers to have some sort of timeline and template of when they want to implement this. It's a big task, especially if they've never done it in the past. And so we help them to design a template and a timeline that is actually doable for them. We know that in year one, they may not be able to implement everything. So we want to start at a place that gets them most comfortable and pushing them forward without making it too overwhelming to them. We also help them talk about their timeline. Of course, teachers have to make this decision along with their school leadership members, but we certainly want to give them guidance and help them decide what might be best for them. We also help them as we're looking at ELA and math of what has changed, what is going to make this have to be more rigorous than what we've been currently doing. Where have the changes taken place, and where does that have the most impact in our schools? First of all, we'd like to share with you the 6 major shifts that have happened in ELA. And then we'll talk about the 6 major shifts that have happened in math. When we talk about ELA, first of all, there's going to be a bigger balancing informational and literary materials. In the past, particularly in the elementary grades, a lot of emphasis has been placed on literary material. Not as much emphasis was placed on informational material, and we see now that there should be about a 50-50 split between their day of how much of their ELA is based on literary and how much of their ELA time is based on informational text. So making sure that that happens within the ELA classroom or within the elementary ed day is going to be a huge shift for them. And then as we get into high school, that shift even changes more when actually high school students should spend up to 80% of their academic day working on informational text. Now, we know that this is going to become almost impossible if it all is placed on the ELA teacher's shoulders, so therefore that's why Common Core is asking for accountability to also be coming from the science, the history, and the technical courses in terms of informational text. We also are looking at the those content areas outside of ELA, the science, the history, the social studies, as I mentioned. The complexity of the reading material has changed quite a bit, not a whole lot, but it has changed. And so as we're looking at what reading passages we need to use some instrument to determine text complexity. And there are many instruments out there available on the internet, as well as your textbooks that will be coming out with Common Core. I'm sure they will be listing the new complexity and Lexile scores. But we do have to make sure that our level of complexity has increased. Having those rich, rigorous conversations, students need to have it based on their common text. So it's very important for students to talk about the materials that they read. The classroom experiences need to stay deeply connected to the text. Writing needs to emphasize the use of evidence to inform or to make an argument. And so we need to make sure that we give students plenty of opportunities to write within the classroom every day. And then an academic vocabulary, building that academic level where students are using 50,000 words or more based on their knowledge of the vocabulary. And there are many lists out there available. I encourage you all to look at some of those lists and to make sure teachers are using those academic vocabulary lists to improve their students' working vocabulary. It certainly will help them become more rigorous in their learning. Here's an example of analyzing text complexity that was provided by some of the Common Core material, where we look at a qualitative measure, quantitative measure, the text description, and then considering for the reader and the task at hand. These are the 4 parts of measuring text complexity. So as you're looking at a particular material, here's a book that has been analyzed. Notice that the qualitative information has been put in. The text description has been assigned to it. The teachers have looked at the quantitative measure of the Lexile score, and then they've considered, is this appropriate for the reader, and is this appropriate for the task that we have at hand? I understand that teachers do not have time to do this type of analysis on every piece of work they use, but they do need to be aware that they need to use materials that have been through this type of analysis. And so they need to make sure they're looking at lists that have been approved either by Common Core or some of their textbook companies, and checking those Lexile scores and just asking themselves, is this truly what my children or my students need for this particular moment in their lives? Is this the best and the most rigorous piece of information that I can use with them? And another thing I would say is they need many pieces, not just 1 or 2 samples, because a lot of times our ELA teachers will teach a particular piece of literary work in the classroom and test on that and then move on. But in actuality, once they've taught a piece of work, tested that piece of work, and modeled through it, they also need to give some very cold reads to their students to practice, in addition to what they offered them in the classroom under their modeling. There's also some rubrics out there to measure the complexity of informational text and of literary text. These are all, you can find many of these rubrics in the Common Core literature, in some of the appendices that have been put out there, and then several states are developing their own rubrics. We certainly will come in with our consultants and use the same type of information with the teachers that we work with to help them if they have any questions about whether a piece is actually going to be complex enough or not. When we look at math, there are 6 major shifts in mathematics as well. First of all, the focus of math has changed. It's now much deeper and more narrow, and as a result of that, a lot of teachers who have taught math in the past at a particular grade level are very nervous about leaving off pieces because they feel like, well, if I don't teach this, when are the children going to get it? So one of the things that I've seen in working with math teachers, specifically at the elementary grade levels, is they have been most concerned about the pieces that they see are being taken away from their current math curriculum, and then how to go deeper into the ones that they have left. Coherence, connecting the learning across the grades and within the grades need to happen. Spiraling the fractions or multiplication among many grade levels needs to take place. A lot of vertical teaming among elementary math teachers would be certainly an advantageous thing to do. And then fluency. There are many things, simple calculations that students need to be checked on every year for fluency, and so we want to talk about that particular shift as well. Having a deep understanding, more than just getting an answer, more than just following a set of rules. Having students explore and think about different ways they could solve a problem. I know this goes against everything many of us were taught. Even me personally, I wanted to learn the rules so that I'd never miss the problem. But as a result, I'm probably not the greatest mathematical mind out there. Actually, I know I'm not. So having that deep understanding of math is certainly something that's new, and it's very difficult for teachers to build that kind of a mathematical mind when they feel like they only have a certain amount of time. And so hopefully by narrowing the focus, they will be able to start doing that more efficiently. Having students understand the applications of math in real life is also a new shift. And then having the students that are practicing and understanding math, a balance between these in the classroom, both of them occurring with intensity. Having the teacher to provide opportunities for students to participate in drills, but then also to make use of those skills in a deeper application of mathematics. Here are some required fluencies for Common Core by grade level. And so as you can see that as the grade levels increase, there's more and more that the students need to be able to do at a fluent level. Certainly these need to be checked for speed as well as accuracy as they're moving up through the grades. And so these fluency checks should be part of the Common Core curriculum for right here, K-8. Being fluent in the standards means fast and accurate, so we need to make sure that when we talk about fluency, as we're checking these things, this is every student fluent in this particular skill by the end of this particular grade, not just some of the students, but every student should be fluent in these particular skills. As we come in and work with them during Catalyst 1, we use this particular curriculum design where, first of all, we look at our standards, we understand that we're going to have to build units from those standards, and then we start helping them design the curriculum. And then, of course, a lot of this particular design is left up through implementation throughout the year, which would occur in other catalysts or if the school decided to do it on their own. This is one activity that I really recommend for any school to do, and that is that vertical teaming where we're looking at standards from various grades, and here's a chart that's been completed. If you look at this chart, you can see that they're looking at representing and interpreting data for math. They're looking at grades 3, 4, and 5. They're looking at the changes between grades 3 and 4 and between grades 4 and 5. What are those changes? How does it become more rigorous? They're also looking at the levels of instruction that are required, and finally the implications for instruction and assessment. This is a very good tool to use among grade levels. I've used it in a couple of schools this summer, and it is really a powerful thing for them to have and to sit and talk with each other, especially in mathematics, where you have a lot of elementary teachers who are really struggling with what does it mean to be more rigorous, how does it look at the next grade level, how did the previous grade level teach it, and what do I need to do to make sure that I cover mine rigorously. The second thing that we would do in Catalyst 1 would be to talk to the teachers about prioritizing the standards in the units. We know that when you're teaching a unit, you're going to cover many standards. You're going to talk about many things, but for that particular unit, it's always good for them to prioritize which standards are we going to focus on more. Which ones do we want to assess for this particular unit for mastery? And those are going to be the ones that would come out on the end of the unit test. So as we prioritize the standards, then we look at the units of study, assign those standards to the units, and develop a pacing calendar from that particular unit of study assignment. As we're looking at units, we want to make sure that by the time that our students are tested, if it is a tested year, that we've covered every major standard in communication arts or math that could be assessed on a state assessment, that we've covered it well, and that we have documentation through unit assessments, formative assessments, common assessments, that our students have mastered these skills. And so it's very important for teachers to spend a good deal of time thinking about what those units need to be and which priority standards need to have the focus for that particular unit. We work on a curriculum map, the beginnings of it. We certainly can't finish a curriculum map in 2 days. I don't think anyone can very effectively. I know there's a lot of software out there now that helps teachers develop a really nice curriculum map very quickly. I've seen several out there that have used it, and we certainly want them to use what's easy for them. But as they're building the curriculum map, we certainly want them to take time to methodically think through what they're checking, what they're deciding to put in their curriculum map. So we spend a lot of time talking about the actual skills, the resources, the assessments that they will use, the academic vocabulary that's aligned to that particular unit, and what are the essential questions or the big ideas that are coming out. And here's an example of a curriculum map that has been completed. This particular map was done as the state standards as well as Common Core were being implemented at the same time still. And so this is for an English 12 class, and you can see that the skills and the content are written in what the students will be able to do. They have their resources listed, what types of assessments they choose to use, the content, vocabulary, the academic vocabulary, and then finally what their essential questions are going to be. And this is just one variation. I've seen several variations of this particular curriculum map. I actually worked with a group last week. Theirs was just slightly different, had a couple of different columns, but basically if we know what the content standard is, what the unit is, we've got assigned to those priority standards, and then the academic vocabulary and how we're going to assess it, along with some resources. The teachers then have a roadmap for what they need to do to accomplish their goals. Here's one that's just begun in math, where the teachers have gone in and for each quarter they have decided what those particular units are going to be, how many days they're going to spend on a particular unit, and they've already put in their standards. Now, they've only worked on it a week or so, so they still have to add in a lot of their vocabulary, and this is a variation of the last one. But you can see that they've got a head start. When they start in August, they will already know what their units are going to be. It will just be a time that they will need to devote to developing that vocabulary and resource list. So basically for Cat 1, if we can get our teachers through the deconstruction of the standards, actually understanding them, their units, and a pacing guide, that is really the completion of those 2 days per ELA math and the science and history groups. We want to be able to unwrap it or deconstruct those standards with them And notice in Ainsworth's model, he doesn't unwrap the standards until after the units are in place and they're on the pacing guide. I've had mixed emotions about this. I've done it both ways. I have been deconstructing all the standards prior to pacing with many groups. I tried his model last week, and it really worked just as effectively. The teachers, it was an ELA group of teachers. They knew what units they wanted to traditionally teach. They found their literary pieces, and then as they developed their priority standards list, we started deconstructing the standards at that point. I will have to say, having done it both ways, I think either way is fine. I may even actually like Ainsworth's model a little bit better, especially for ELA teachers, because they do typically love to talk about what they want to teach first, and I think it got the momentum built up for them so that when we actually began the deconstruction, it wasn't so overwhelming to them. So I haven't tried his model on math. I've done the traditional model with math where we deconstructed first, and then we talked about the units. But math teachers tend to know their curriculum very well, and they tend to be able to put their units together very quickly. I didn't see a lot of difference between doing it either way. But again, Mr. Ainsworth puts his deconstruction actually after the units have been decided and put on a pacing chart. So in this particular step of his model, we would also talk about the big questions, the essential questions. That's part of our pacing guide. And then we would develop end-of-unit tests. Now, there's no way that we can do that within our 2-day model of Catalyst 1. What we do during the 2 days, we show the teachers what types of format they need to use and how they need to develop that assessment piece. Typically, we can leave there with at least one question to develop for a particular unit with them and check those with them to see if they're on the right track. But, of course, those full assessments would have to be built later in the year and would fall under a Catalyst 2. So we do go over it with them, though, and give them a model for designing those formative and those unit tests. We do recommend that there is a pre-assessment given for that particular unit, and some of them do it on a semester basis. Some of our clients do it on a unit basis. It just really depends on the particular client and what they decide to do in terms of testing, but there is a need for a pre-assessment. Like what Mr. Ainsworth says, that the pre-assessment does not have to be equal in length of the post-test. It is basically to give you a guide of where your students are going in, and so it can be a parallel test, but it doesn't have to be. Basically, you're gathering information before you begin teaching. And actually, if you notice his model here, we should develop our units, develop our pacing guide, unwrap our standards, build our post-assessment and pre-assessment before we ever start thinking about how we're going to teach this particular material. So, of course, at this point, we end Catalyst 1, and then we leave our teachers with the thoughts of as they move into Catalyst 2, they would have to have the learning experiences, what their ELL intervention special needs would look like, how they're going to develop an intervention model, how they're going to progress monitor, and then what their lesson plans may look like. Here's the template that I've been using for unpacking Common Core standards, where we choose the standards for a particular unit. We put the nouns from that standard or the set of standards in one column. We put the skills or the verbs in another. We talk about the big idea. We talk about the essential questions. This template is used to build the unit test. The unit test is built specifically from the verbs and the skills and from the concepts and the nouns that we've listed here. And we know that to have a good assessment, we must cover everything that we have listed in those two columns on the test for a post-assessment in some form. We also work with our teachers to help them develop kid-friendly terms. Students should have a way to know if they're mastering their standards, and so we have developed a set of I can statements that we use during this phase to help our teachers see that students also need to keep up to have that self-reporting part in their curriculum. When students self-report, it is the most effective, a highly effective strategy. If you read John Hattie's book on visible learning, you will notice that self-reporting among students is the most effective strategy you can use in a school, according to the research. We talk about having a balanced assessment model with our teachers. What is a formative test? What is a summative test? We use those terms so loosely in our schools and our districts and among educators that a lot of times our teachers get confused about what it is. So we spend some time with them going through what is a true formative, what is a true summative, when do we give them, what's the best time to give them, and how they should be implemented into our classes. To build a common assessment or unit test, we help them. Here's a particular template we use where the standards are listed for that particular unit test. And then after the standards are listed, we go through and talk about what types of questions based on those verbs would have to be designed for that particular standard and that particular verb. So we do talk about Bloom's taxonomy. We talk about the verbs. What does that mean? Is it going to be best answered by a multiple choice question? Is it going to be best answered through a short answer question? Does it require a project? Does it require some creation of the student? So we help them think about those standards as they're going through them and what those particular assessments may look like. And then the last part of Ainsworth's rigorous curriculum model is actually implementing the curricular units. This is not covered in Catalyst 1 other than we tell them this is what you have to do. Implementation of the curricular units is by far the most critical piece. We can plan all we want to. We can write the best curriculum plans under the sun. We can design assessments that are by far the best, the most rigorous, but it is truly the implementation of that instruction based on the way each individual student learns that makes the greatest impact for our scores and for our students. So we certainly want our teachers to spend time. Again, for this implementation of curricular units, that would come under a Catalyst 2 or a Catalyst 3. And if you follow the boot camp series, you'll hear more about those in the coming months. But we definitely leave our teachers with the rules for what they need to look for as they're moving forward. And there are 14 steps to implementing curriculum that Ainsworth talks about, and we certainly want to make sure that we cover that with them as well. So basically, for Catalyst 1, to go back and talk about it for just a moment, we have a Catalyst 1 set up where we spend basically one day with a project scoping. We spend, we spend one day with project scoping, planning with administrators and teacher leaders and teachers of what they need for their particular school. We try to spend 2 days with each content area, helping them set up for their curriculum planning, their pacing, and what tests need to look like for those units. We also, during that time, help them work on deconstructing their standards and understanding those verbs and nouns. Again, that's 2 days with ELA, 2 days with math, 2 days with science and technology, 2 days with social studies, and then we like to go back an additional day to give an overview. And this is all a very low introductory package for that. Certainly there are some schools that will take this and be able to implement it for the rest of the year without additional help, but then there are other schools that would continue to want to move forward with a Catalyst 2 and a Catalyst 3. So this concludes my information on Cat 1. My name is Sarah Odom. I am the Chief Academic Officer for STI Achievement Services. I've worked with the company now 6 years, and I actually was one of the founding people who started this division for Achievement Services. It was an offspring of the assessment piece that they have, which was their formative assessment tool that we use with all of our clients, basically, to give formative tests. And we are out there working every day to help teachers. We've worked with a school improvement model for several years that we've used. It's been highly successful. We have many case studies that you can find on our STI Achievement Services website.